This is the sound of your ride home with Dad after he caught you vaping. Awkward, isn't it? Most vapes contain seriously addictive levels of nicotine and disappointment. Know the real cost of vapes. Brought to you by the FDA.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Okay, pop quiz. What was the highest grossing documentary of 2024? I'll wait.
Well, it might surprise people to learn that it is Matt Walsh's Am I Racist?
This is Barry Hertz, who covers movies over at the Globe and Mail. I have never heard about this film until I started prepping for this interview. Does that surprise you?
I think most people probably who listen to this podcast would not have heard of this film. It is a quasi-Borat-like exploration set to kind of uncover the race hustlers and grifters working inside the diversity, equity, and inclusion space.
Yeah. I mean, the arc of the movie, as I understand it, is that it follows one guy, Matt Walsh, who's a conservative political commentator, as he becomes a diversity, equity, and inclusion, quote-unquote, expert. But he's mostly there to laugh at the people around him. Fair?
Extremely fair. Yeah, this is a movie in which its target was set way before any cameras rolled.
Watching Am I Racist? You'd be forgiven for being a little disoriented by its aesthetics. This movie was produced by conservative pranksters of the Daily Wire, but it feels like it could have been made by someone like Michael Moore or the late Morgan Spurlock. Like Super Size Me or Bowling for Columbine, Am I Racist relies on funny music cues and stunts.
Joining us now is Matt. He's a certified DEI expert. And Matt, let's start with what you do. What is a certified DEI expert?
Well, that's someone who takes you on a journey of diversity and inclusion. And
it opens with a scene in which its star, Matt Walsh, appears on a local Utah chat show in the wholly fabricated persona of a DEI consultant. He's donned a wig with a man bun and a tweed blazer to play up the effect. He tells the hosts to stand up and stretch.
So what you're doing is you're stretching, and this is more for you and less for you, but you're stretching up like this, and you're stretching out. And what you're doing is you're stretching out of your whiteness. Okay, so you're decentering your whiteness. You're stretching out of your whiteness. You're probably wondering if this is real. The answer is yes, it's real. That's me, Matt Walsh.
This movie mostly seems to present the ideas that it's talking about as idiotic on their face rather than engaging with them. Like, I was like, I don't know who this is for and why this would work, but maybe that's just because of who I am.
I mean, I think it is, very much a case of preaching to the choir. The audience that is going to see this, that it is being marketed and targeted toward, already thinks that, the woke virus has infected America beyond repair.
Yeah. I mean, I know you went to go watch a screening of Am I Racist to see, how the crowd reacted. What did you find?
They were eating this up. There were laughs, there were cheers, there was shouts of amen. It was exactly playing as a kind of, again, that kind of cathartic rock concert vibe. These are audiences who have felt rejected and ostracized by, what they term as the liberal mainstream entertainment complex. And here was something that was speaking truth to power in their mind.
You know, there's been so much talk since the American election about the media environment and reaching young men and boys. I wonder if a Hollywood executive would look at this auditorium full of young people eating this documentary up and think, oh, like, I'd love to do this.
Those conversations are very much happening within the hallways and boardrooms of, so-called legacy Hollywood studios. This is, as we've seen from the box office receipts, a remarkable success in a theatrical space that has not had a lot of success recently.
Today on the show, if you think the 2024 election only changed things in Washington, what exactly have you been streaming recently? I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. This episode is brought to you by Discover. It's always nice to get more for less. So here's a life hack that can automatically put some extra cash in your pocket. Discover will automatically double all the cash back you've earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. So you could get some money for this holiday season and get more next holiday season. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard. The Daily Wire, the media company that made Am I Racist, was started back in 2015 by conservative commentator Ben Shapiro and filmmaker Jeremy Boring. Though the company has a streaming service, Daily Wire Plus, their initial focus was more on news than entertainment.
They were basically trying to fill a hole that they found in the media landscape for conservative commentary that was aggressive and smart and, well, let's just mostly say aggressive. So initially it was really just, aggregation and op-eds. Eventually, they kind of stumbled into the podcasting boom, especially with Ben Shapiro and gathering other conservative commentators in that space who were kind of in the wilderness of right-wing radio. And since then, they've really built up quite a mini empire. I guess the easiest kind of comparison would be the challenger to a Fox News landscape.
I mean, you said Daily Wire Plus is supposed to be like the Netflix for conservatives. And I do think like the stuff they put out looks really good. Like it looks professional.
It is very much professional. So after kind of, getting into the podcasting space, they decided to take on the streaming sector head on by creating film and television for their audience. And really they did it by using the Hollywood system. They got an in-house producer named Dallas Saunier, who was working in Hollywood, but then had moved back to Texas. But really, he knew how to make things from nothing. He knew how to work the Hollywood kind of infrastructure in a low-budget sphere to appeal to a more populist crowd. And they brought him in, and the resulting productions, while maybe not wholly satisfying on a narrative or thematic kind of scale, they do look good.
Yeah.
They are professionally produced. They do feature actors with experience and sometimes even name recognition.
Yeah, Am I Racist is not like their first thing out of the gate. Like they've also done movies like this comedy called Lady Ballers, which is a shot at trans people in sports. The idea is a male basketball team is like, oh, we can just say we're women and play, and isn't that funny to see what happens?
Yes, sir. Ladies, you look ridiculous. Felix, get that bra off your head, and you got to shave your beard. Girls don't have beards, right?
Yeah, I mean, Lady Ballers is even more so than I would say Walsh's film, kind of indicative of the Daily Wire sensibility and the politics that drive behind it. But at the same time, it is such a unique and fascinating construction of like this kind of, almost like Airplane, Naked Gun, Trey Parker, Matt Stone kind of comedy that throws gags at the wall a million miles a minute to see what sticks. But behind it all is this ideology that trans people are evil and the people who support them even more so. So it's just fascinating to watch those two sensibilities collide on screen.
Yeah, it's funny to me to watch something like Lady Ballers because in some ways it's like going back in time, It's like the kind of jokes, like I remember White Chicks, right? Where it's like Black comedians dressing up like white girls and it's funny. And that was not that long ago. And like it's sort of that, but it's a little more pointed and it's a little rougher and has a real political point to make.
Yeah. And the other kind of fascinating thing about it is kind of like Daily Wire plus the movie because they do have kind of trouble attracting name brand performers because those who would kind of work with Daily Wire would risk ostracization by, traditional Hollywood studios. So they kind of plumb their own talent pool. The lead role in that of the basketball coach is played by Jeremy Boring, who's the co-chief executive of Daily Wire.
Oh, wow.
The members of the basketball team are all podcasters on the Daily Wire. Matt Walsh has a small supporting role there, again, kind of playing like this ultra-left doofus who is, again, meant to be mocked at. Ben Shapiro has a role as a referee. Jordan Peterson, Canada's greatest cultural export, has a small cameo toward the end. So it is kind of this weird, gangs all here, let's put on a show kind of approach.
So Am I Racist, this documentary that we started off the show talking about, it's the first Daily Wire movie to get a theatrical release. Why did they want to do that? Was it just sort of, can we do this? Let's see what happens?
I think it was part experiment, but part very savvy gamble. It, of course, costs money to put a movie into the theatrical space, distribution costs, marketing costs. And there was the risk that by putting it out there, it could have fallen flat on its face and be seen as a real failure on the part of the Daily Wire strategy.
Why didn't it?
Well, why did Donald Trump win the election? There's an audience out there that feels underserved and feels underheard, and they flocked to it. And the marketing was very targeted, and it was very savvy, and it was playing in very specific kind of geographical locations chosen for that demographic purpose, and then expanded as such. And they did it because they knew that if they could get numbers on the board, if they could get those box office numbers reported, then they would make noise. One of Matt Walsh's kind of constant shticks is that he was so upset that nobody covered What Is a Woman, his first documentary, because the mainstream media was so afraid of it. And he was welcoming any kind of criticism, just as long as it was being written about. And this was kind of the next step in that, is like, can we be so big? Can we get in the top 10 of the weekend that it will force the mainstream media to acknowledge that we exist? And guess what? It did. Here we are.
It isn't just Daily Wire doing so well at the box office. Like this past summer, a Ronald Reagan biopic starring Dennis Quaid was also pretty successful on a low budget. Critics hated it, including you. Slate ran an article by a historian about this movie, and he basically said it's not just that Reagan was a bad movie, it was totally ahistorical because it fronted this story from Reagan's youth about how he was kind to Black basketball players that he played with while kind of ignoring his actual record on civil rights. Why do you think Reagan found an audience anyway? And was it doing something different than what Daily Wire is doing that we should pay attention to separately?
I think it's all part of a piece. It's all about appealing to a movie-going crowd, and we can kind of lazily segment it into the middle America flyover country, but I don't think that's quite accurate because it was also playing in major metropolitan centers on the coast as well and doing quite well. There is an aggrieved marketplace that is a little bit in a cultural silo, And along comes a product that speaks explicitly, directly, loudly to them. And quality is kind of a secondary consideration.
Over what? Like, what do you think the audience is craving from these films?
They're craving something that agrees with them, that says, you're right, your view of culture, of history, your talking points are valid. And we're going to cater to those, and we're going to create a kind of echo chamber about it. I mean, as you say, like Reagan would be laughed out of the room by anybody with even a modicum of political nuance to his presidency. It is for people who really want to go back to a time when their views weren't so questioned or assaulted, and that they could freely say, I'm standing with the Gipper.
You know, I was wondering a little bit why you and I are talking about this now. And I say that because I'm old. And I'm old enough to remember other conservative efforts to create some sort of alternative to Hollywood that makes films that speak to a different audience. Like I remember when Mel Gibson made The Passion of the Christ 20 years ago, you know? Which strikes me as a similar thing to Reagan. And I was realizing part of what I think is different now is Hollywood. Because back then, 20 years ago, I think there was still an assumed monoculture, and that every film could potentially be a box office smash. And now it's more like fighting over crumbs and like microcultures. And so that makes space for this in all kinds of ways, and means executives are interested at a very high level because, frankly, they're just trying to find whatever little niche they can serve, since they can't get everyone all the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, something like The Passion of the Christ, that's a $400 million behemoth. And we talk about Reagan in kind of similar terms as a success, even though Reagan has made about 30 million. So it is that you find the success where you can get it. And if something resonates, even on a smaller level, you go after it and you try to exploit it.
After the break, how Hollywood's biggest studios are also prioritizing conservative audiences.
Planned Parenthood Federation of America exists so that all people can get access to the sexual and reproductive care and education they need to make informed decisions about their health. More than 2 million patients a year rely on the services Planned Parenthood health centers provide, like STI testing and treatment, birth control, gender-affirming care, abortion, cancer screenings, and so much more. Right now, all across the country, reproductive health care and rights are under attack from public officials who are out of step with the will of the vast majority of Americans. The constitutional right to abortion, control of our bodies, and the health care we need has been stolen from us. And now politicians in 47 states, yes, 47, have introduced bills that would block people from getting the sexual and reproductive care they need. Planned Parenthood knows that equitable access to health care, including safe, legal abortion, is a human right. Right now, Planned Parenthood needs your help to protect access to health care. Donate today by visiting PlannedParenthood.org/protect.
This episode is brought to you by Public.com. Interest rates have fallen, but you can still lock in a 6% or higher yield with a bond account at Public.com. That's a pretty big deal, because when rates drop, so can the interest rate you earn on your investments. A bond account allows you to lock in a 6% or higher yield with a diversified portfolio of high-yield and investment-grade corporate bonds. So, while other people are watching their returns shrink, you could be earning regular interest payments. But a yield is not locked in until you invest, so check it out. The good news is it only takes a couple of minutes to sign up at Public.com. Lock in a 6% or higher yield with a bond account. Only at Public.com/whatnext. Brought to you by Public Investing, member FINRA and SIPC. As of September 26, 2024, the average annualized yield to worst across the bond account is greater than 6%. Yield to worst is not guaranteed. not an investment recommendation. All investing involves risk. Visit public.com/disclosures/bond-account for more info. Okay, so I want to now talk about the ways we're seeing the conservative imprint in Hollywood. Because at the same time as we're seeing movies like Reagan and Am I Racist, big budget Hollywood studios are doing their own kind of pivot. I can't help but think about Disney here because Disney's been on such a journey over the last few years, both like in its leadership, but then also in terms of how it's faced politically. You know, Disney was really targeted by conservatives for the content they were creating and then how they were presenting it. Like they were putting trigger warnings on their stuff on Disney Plus, and I think that really upset people. And then, of course, in 2022, a conservative activist found a video of a Disney producer talking about her not-so-secret gay agenda, and that set some people off. How has Disney evolved in this moment, or have they?
Disney is a great point because I think we are seeing a steering of the ship. I mean, a movie studio, again, not to use the ship metaphor, but it is such a large thing that to turn it in any one direction takes a lot of time to see the actual effects. So, you know, we did see in their recent films, there has been that acknowledgement, let's say, of a diverse reality. You know, their animated film Strange World had gay characters, explicitly gay characters. Same thing in some of the other animated efforts. There has been a pushback to that. The company is certainly aware of it. CEO Bob Iger has alluded to politics kind of subsuming or overtaking storytelling. So I think we are in the coming years, as the kind of development slate, you know, irons itself out, going to see a bit of a retrenchment to avoiding any kind of topics that could be seen as progressive or left. We're going to see less explicit, same-sex romance in children-targeted films. I can pretty safely predict we're not going to see any kind of non-binary or trans representation coming from Disney, certainly not within the next 4 or 5 years. As goes Disney, so goes the market.
Yeah, I mean, some Pixar employees spoke out and said that when they were making Inside Out 2, they were told to make one of the characters less gay, which is kind of interesting because they're talking about like a girl, like a 13-year-old, I think. You know, it was just it felt bad what they were saying.
Yeah. And actually, you know, watching Inside Out 2 for the first time, before this kind of these stories broke about kind of the inside workings behind the scenes of production, the character of Riley, there is something that the animators and storytellers were trying to do there that feels incomplete.
Yeah, they pulled their punches a little bit. Riley's the little girl at the center of it with all these emotional characters in her head.
Yeah, and she forms this relationship with this kind of friendship with this older female hockey player that you can kind of read as developing a crush on. And, you know, inside her head, there's this big dark secret that she's hiding that is kind of flicked at and alluded to, but never actually fully comes to fruition. So these half measures seem to have been taken. And it's a different tune of the same song that happens in the Hollywood industry. You know, if something is on the border of offending and risking losing an audience, losing a market, then let's tweak it to the point where it seems so vague we can't really tell what's going on. It's kind of like a repeat of the whole Hollywood capitulation to China that happened about a decade ago. If there was a villain that could be represented as Chinese, let's take him out.
Because it was such a big marketplace.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same kind of situation here. If there's a marketplace, are we going to offend this conservative audience who has, you know, made their choices and movie-going choices rather vocal over the recent months and years? Are we going to lose them? Well, we can't afford to do that.
I wonder if it's worth talking about the movie Twisters here, which is just sort of like a fun tornado movie, right? But it didn't talk about climate change, even though arguably you could say storms are getting worse because of climate change. The New York Times called this a dog whistle to conservative ticket buyers. I don't know if you agree.
I think there's something there. I don't know how explicit it was. The director of that film on the press tour went through pains to say, it's not about climate change. It has nothing. I was never, envisioning climate change. But that is a movie, again, that is very middle America kind of targeted. Cowboys riding the plains of America, fighting these storms, or I don't really know how you fight a storm, but anyways, so there was some messaging there, but I think it is kind of a general part of a move away from anything remotely political, certainly anything remotely liberal-minded that could be viewed as an offense. We just don't have these kind of films that are taking any sort of stand. I mean, I was listening to a podcast recently that went through the whole debacle that was Seth Rogen's The Interview and the kind of hubbub that caused with North Korea, and then led to the Sony hack and everything like that. And one of the points that was made there is really that was kind of like the last great gasp of a political comedy that was released in theaters. We had the Borat sequel that was, direct to Amazon Prime during the pandemic.
Right before the election, notably, in 2020.
Yeah, right before the election. But also when your juiciest target is Rudy Giuliani, like that's kind of just like shooting fish in a barrel. So you do notice that when was the last time a major studio put forward any kind of movie that could be read in any explicit political terms, whether a comedy or a political thriller, anything that really kind of took place in the halls of power with decision makers, with a ideological viewpoint.
Yeah. As we talked, I was thinking about Twisters and Disney and all that sort of stuff. And it struck me that unlike, say, Am I Racist?, those Disney movies, Twisters, they're not attacking liberals. They're just being silent on an issue that might be relevant contextually or provide a nuance or a shade, which is kind of like what good art does. So I don't know. I wonder if that difference is important or problematic to you. Maybe more problematic than the Am I Racist, which is like easy to filter out. You know what I mean? Like it's easy to be like, oh, well, that's just that. But this is like more insidious.
It is. I mean, I'm not going to say Twisters is good art or even good blockbuster art. I found the sequel entirely wanting, certainly compared to Jan de Bont's original. But there is that insidious of ignoring something, of pretending it doesn't exist, whether it's explicit to the narrative or not. It is putting blinders on, and it is really then there's no shade to it. You're making mush. What's the point of mush? It's pablum. And even halfway good blockbusters, I would argue, the films of Michael Bay, they have something to say. You might not like it, but they do say something. And I feel like we're approaching or we're in the thick of a kind of Hollywood era where nobody has anything to say other than, gee, I hope this makes some money.
Barry, I'm really grateful for your time and for this chat. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Barry Hertz is the deputy arts editor and film editor for the Globe and Mail. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, and Madeline Ducharme. Ethan Oberman produced this show. We're led by Alicia Montgomery. Ben Richmond is the senior director of podcast operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. You can go track me down on Blue Sky if you want. Say hello. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.
When you're part of a military family, you understand sacrifice and support. At American Public University, we honor your dedication by extending our military tuition savings to your extended family. Parents, spouses, legal partners, siblings, and dependents all qualify for APU's preferred military rate of just $250 per credit hour for undergraduate and master's level programs. American Public University. value for the whole family. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.